The Rules and Administration Committee shall come to order. Today is March 19th, 2026, and it is 3:02 p.m. Members, we have a number of matters before the Rules Committee today. It is good to see members and others. Usually we don't have so many people in the Rules Committee, but there are a lot of people here, it's great to see you all. I'm glad to know that we're doing work that matters to people, as we always do here. I know you have the agenda before you. We're gonna take up the sports betting bill and where it's going next. And we're gonna talk about a resolution from Senator Hauschild, and then we're gonna talk about a change to our rules dealing with the presence of children, minor children on the floor. And with that, I'd like to bring to the table first Senator Frentz and Senate File 4139, which is dealing with sports betting. Senator Frentz, welcome to the committee. I'm just looking to see if the camera is going to move to you so that you can begin your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On my screen, it is showing that my camera is working. Is it not coming?
It is now.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair and members, and thank you for considering this question of referral. This is the sports betting bill that was introduced on the floor on March 4th. I am asking for the committee to allow the original referral of the President's office to the Commerce Committee. This bill has received a lot of discussion over the previous years. The topic is an important one, and the reasons are the following. First of all, I've spoken with both the chair of the committees, that is Senator Zhang in State and Local Government, also Senator Klein in the Commerce Committee. As the chief author, we are in agreement that that's an appropriate referral, with the understanding that the bill would have to go to state and local government as part of any path to final passage. There are instances in the past when the chair's prerogative to make those decisions have been respected. I've been in the Senate for 9 years and 2 months, not that I'm counting, and have seen members of both parties in the majority and make changes to the referral process. Given that we want to have the discussion on the consumer protection aspects of the bill, and given that it is presented in this year, and really this year only, that sports betting is now being advertised as legal in all 50 states, I think that is the best part of the pathway and will allow it to be heard by those members of the Commerce Committee who are most versed in consumer protection. The Rules Committee has the ultimate say, and I respect it as a member of the Rules Committee, and stand ready to discuss Senator Rasmussen's concerns, members of the committee's concerns. I want to add that I have been in touch with members of this committee, including a conversation with Senator Marty today, and I think our ultimate goal for this bill and for the Senate chamber as a whole is that there's collaboration among supporters and opponents of legislation, that we get a full opportunity to hear those, and I think the referral to the Commerce Committee would allow that. Given that, Madam Chair, happy to entertain questions or discuss or respond as members feel is appropriate. Very much appreciate the time.
Thank you, Senator Frentz. I want to remind those who are not on the committee that the discussion today around this piece of legislation is not a discussion about the substance of the proposal, but instead about its path. And we're here in the Rules Committee because a member made a motion to send it here to have a discussion about the path. Senator Frentz has just shared with us his perspective on where the bill would go per his preference as the bill's author. And now I'd like to invite Senator Rasmussen, who made the 4.11 motion on the floor, to raise the question of the path of the bill. Welcome to the committee, Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this really important matter today. Senate rules allow an individual member to challenge the referral of a bill, and I believe that that rule should be used very sparingly and only when necessary. And Madam Chair, whenever I have objected to the referral of a bill to a committee, I have felt like this Rules Committee has given us a fair hearing and has decided consistent with the rules. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be here before you today. I objected to the updated reference of Senate File 4139 to the Commerce Committee because the Committee of Primary Concern and Jurisdiction is the Committee on State and Local Government. Senate File 4139 would legalize online sports gambling. If you look at the Senate committee jurisdiction list that is published by the President's office, there is not a single reference to gambling in the Commerce Committee's jurisdiction. However, if you turn to the jurisdiction list for the Committee on State and Local Government, it very clearly states that the State and Local Government and Veterans Committee has jurisdiction over all bills regarding gambling, lotteries, and parimutuel wagering. And it goes on to show the Gambling Control Board, the Racing Commission, and a whole host of other issues related to gambling. It also says in that document that a bill is normally referred to the first committee of primary jurisdiction. And Madam Chair and members, the President's office has been right on this bill repeatedly on different gambling bills, sports gambling bills that have been introduced in the legislature. Both in this biennium and the last biennium, every single bill on sports gambling was initially referred to the Committee on State and Local Government. I'll just go through them here. In this current biennium, Senate File 757, which is a Frentz bill, was referred to State and Local Government. Senator Marty's Senate File 978 was referred to State and Local Government. Senator Frentz's Senate File 3414 was referred to State and Local Government. Senator Miller's Senate File 1124 referred to State and Local Government. Senator Frentz's 4139 was printed in the Journal as being referred to State and Local Government, and then was changed as an oral change, which I objected to bringing the bill here today. And Madam Chair, if we go back to the last biennium and look at all the sports gambling bills that were introduced, they also all went to State and Local Government first. Senator Klein's Senate File 1949, Senator Miller's Senate File 2425, Senator Miller's Senate File 3803, and Senator Marty's Senate File 5330. All were referred to State and Local Government. Having a predictable and a reliable process for committee reference is important to a functioning legislative body. We have committees who develop expertise over areas of jurisdiction, and they should be allowed the first opportunity to hear about new legislation and to propose potential changes. It's the practice of the Minnesota Senate that the bill is first referred to the Committee of Primary Jurisdiction, and that's been true for all of the bills relating to sports gambling. And that's why, Madam Chair, this bill should go before the State and Local Government Committee first. This question has also been put to the Senate before. Last year, on April 23rd, Senator Frentz made a motion to recall and re-refer a predecessor bill of his current one, Senate File 3417, from the State and Local Government Committee to the Commerce Committee. Senator Frentz also stated then that he would take the bill to Commerce first and then back to State and Local Government. Objections were raised by members, and when a vote was taken, a bipartisan group of 50 senators voted against that motion, with 15 senators voting in favor. A majority of both caucuses opposed sending the bill to Commerce before State and Local Government had acted favorably. In closing, Madam Chair, we have committee jurisdictions for a reason. The Senate President's office has been very consistent over the last two bienniums with bills relating to sports gambling. When the question was put to the Minnesota Senate last year, the Senate decided that sports gambling bills should go to State and Local Government first. And so I would request that this committee re-refer this bill to the proper committee, the Committee of Primary Jurisdiction, the State and Local Government Committee.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. Senator Champion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the committee. Just a couple notes that I think would be important to state from the President's office perspective. One is we have from time to time allowed authors to recommend where a bill goes first. That has been a practice that we've had, and I'm not suggesting that we show any favoritism to any office, to any bill in particular. If a person sends us a note and say, hey, I know that this is going to have to go to all these different committees, but I'd like for it to start here. We've done that. But we've also made it very clear that every bill must be presented in every committee where there's jurisdiction. So it's not, we don't encourage or recommend that someone tries to just go to one committee and not go to the other committees. If for some reason it is not going to go to another committee, that has to be at the discretion of that chair who says, I don't need to hear. But if there's jurisdiction, it has to go to every committee. And again, this is not me speaking to the substance of the bill, because I believe that is something that has to be done, period. As to what Senator Rasmussen is saying, truly, once we, make a determination, where it should go, if a member did not say or did not identify a preference, then it becomes the will of the body to, do what it is that they want to do. So, again, I just wanted to make sure that that's clear, because the President's office has been brought up. We have, garnered the practice that if somebody says, I wanted to go to such and to one committee first, because I know it's still going to have to go to the other, we have done that. And I'm not suggesting that's what we need to do here, but I'm just making sure that we have the context. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Champion. Senator Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple things. One of the things that was mentioned earlier is that this bill is the same as in bills past, and that is not true. Senator Frentz's bill this year is different, and if you look at Section 1 of the bill, it's all about consumer protections, which is in the jurisdiction of the Commerce Committee. So that, in my opinion, would be the correct committee of jurisdiction. Additionally, it has been a long-standing tradition of the Senate that if a bill author has spoken to both of the committee chairs, that a bill can be referred to another committee. So I would say both as what the bill is, and in this first section of the bill being related to consumer protections, it should be in the Commerce jurisdiction. Additionally, Senator Frentz had mentioned that he spoke to both committee chairs in question, and both gave him approval on this, which again is custom and usage, or a longstanding tradition of the Senate to allow that to happen.
Thank you, Senator Miller. There are other members who have a perspective that they want to share on this, which I'm going to allow, given the attention that this is gathering, but wondering first if Senator Frentz has anything more that he wants to add. And Senator Rasmussen, you shouldn't go anywhere, but.
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members. Appreciate the commentary about custom and usage. I think a couple things are worth emphasizing. The instances of prior referrals do not contain the same circumstances here. Senator Miller correctly points out this is a heavy emphasis on consumer protection in this bill, including the first 10 pages. That is without question the jurisdiction of Commerce. But the facility with which chairs, the Senate President, send bills to places at the prerogative of the chairs, I think is important here. And when a bill is presented as having the approval to shift committees and the chairs and the author are in favor, I think it's problematic to say we're still not going to do it. For those reasons, Madam Chair, I respect the process here and look forward to hearing from other members on the motion.
Thank you, Senator Frentz. And then I mentioned this, I think, in a meeting earlier in the term, or in this session. This bill, when introduced in 2023, was referred to state and local government. I was the chair, but then withdrawn and re-referred to Commerce on the floor, which got an affirmative vote by the body at the time. So it was actually heard first in Commerce, and eventually made its way back to state government, and we did 2 full hearings on that proposal in that committee. So I just want to maybe have on the record with clarity that we've had both what you have described, that it goes there, but we've made deviations from that as well. And I think it's important that we're clear on that. All right. I have Senator McQuaid, who's the Vice Chair of State and Local Government, who would like to speak to the path of the bill. I also understand Senator Dibble and Senator Barr. would like to have a word with the committee as well. So if you'd like to get yourself queued up after Senator May Quaid and join us, you'd be most welcome. Senator May Quaid, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I will be brief because Senator Rasmussen did a great job covering a lot of this territory, but I do just want to reiterate, as the Vice Chair of State and Local Gov, we do have jurisdiction over all bills dealing with gambling, lotteries, pari-mutuel wagering, the Gambling Control Board. It's why the bill was referred to state and local government the first time. And while custom and usage can be important for ways we typically or normally do things, we actually do have our Senate committee jurisdictions written down for this purpose so that we do have the process and that bills can travel through it. And so bills will be referred to the first committee of primary concern, and that would be state and local government for this bill. And I hope we can send Senate File 4139 to state and local government, where I know it has been a commitment to have a hearing, and I think it should have a hearing, but go through the process that we've set up for ourselves as a Senate.
Thank you, Senator May Quaid. Questions? Seeing no questions. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will also attempt to be brief. It's hard for a senator to do so, but we'll make every effort. I just wanted to restate and reiterate the points that have been made previously by Senators Rasmussen and May Quaid. When we look to the Senate's jurisdictional guidance, we see, on the document on the top of the Senate committee jurisdictions that a bill be referred first to the committee of primary concern, from which it may be referred to additional committees. It seems like, to me, this is not even a close call. Clearly, state and local government deals with gambling and those sorts of matters. I'm interested in this argument that it's a bill primarily of consumer protection. When you look at the bill's header, the title, and you even glance through the pages that were referenced in previous arguments, even if they are about consumer protection, all about setting up the parameters and all of the elements of sports betting. So perhaps it does touch on other issues that implicate enforcement and some others that are incidental or secondary. But under long-standing practice, when a bill spans multiple areas, it is referred to first to the committee of primary concern and then moves to others as needed. This is, of course, not about this bill, as Senator Rasmussen said. It is about maintaining the integrity of our process, respecting committee expertise, ensuring that major policy questions, substantial one in this case, whether and how Minnesota expands sports betting, are heard in the right forum, at least at the outset. I appreciate the comments of the President, and the President has extended that courtesy to me as well, but typically only on matters of far less consequence and bills that are not quite so substantial and lengthy and have such deep and serious implications. And so that would be my request of this committee, is that we follow rule precedent and send a signal to the public that we do have a process that maintains its integrity. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Dibble. Members, questions for Senator Dibble? Thank you very much. Senator Barr. I'm so glad to see you here on a Thursday.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Always good to be here. Well, I will be probably briefer than all of the rest of the testifiers you've had today, or my members, my colleagues. I too am a member of as a member of the State Government Committee. I would like to see this bill first. I respect the process, and I think the process matters. The State Gov is the committee of jurisdiction, and this bill has typically had problems with state government, and it should go there first, because this is the biggest hurdle it has to jump over. So instead of using other committee time first, bring it to state government, and if this bill can actually get out of state government, then it can go to Commerce for a hearing. Simply my perspective but process matters. It's important to the institution as a whole, and I would hope that we would actually go to the committee of jurisdiction first. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Barr. And welcome to the committee, Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for this hearing today. I'm a member of the State Government Committee too.
And we almost have a quorum of state and local government here.
We do. We do. Yeah, and you were chair of that a little while ago, Madam Chair. So one of the things I think that's important to think about here is if you're going to have a bill, where would it logically go? Now, there's a reason that these jurisdictions have been put out because, and developed. There's a reason this structure of jurisdictional, importance is laid out over time, and that's because the foundational parts of the bill lie in that committee. So the argument's been made, well, we've got some commerce provisions that actually arise, Madam Chair and members, out of the foundational parts of the bill. The foundational work is done in the committee of jurisdiction. That happens there. So if you've got a commerce concern about that bill or perspective of that bill that arises out of the core objective of the bill that may change in the committee of jurisdiction, that needs to happen afterwards because the effect of the underlying part of that will affect the commerce provision or the data privacy provision or any of the other provisions that needs to go to other committees may change, because that's where that change happens. We just had fundamental change to Senator McQuaid's bill today in State Government Committee, and that's where the actual construction of the bill happens. That's where you bring in, you members are all there, you've been there as I have, but that was a point I wanted to make. It just makes logical sense, Madam Chair, to get that foundational stuff done in committee, and the changes that happen are going to affect whether or not it needs to go to Commerce or to somewhere else. If you go to there first and you go and make fundamental changes, it may need to go back to that committee. It's a much less efficient process, and there's a reason we have it the way we do. Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. Senator Rasmussen, do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate all the members who have added their voices to this conversation. And I would just, in closing, direct members to the bill itself. If you have a copy of Senate File 4139, it says in the title that this is a bill for an act relating to gambling. This is a bill about gambling. And it's very clear in our committee jurisdiction here in the Senate that gambling bills go to the Committee of State and Local Government. The previous 8 bills over the past 4 years that have been introduced in the Minnesota Senate have been initially referred to the Committee on State and Local Government because that is the committee of primary jurisdiction. I understand that there might be incidental preferences that come across with bill referrals, or because of timing, things might not always follow that path. However, on a bill of this consequence that has very strong opinions on both sides, I think it is reasonable, fair, and in line with the practice of the Minnesota Senate to give the Committee of Jurisdiction the first opportunity to hear the bill, to debate the bill, and to vote on the bill, and would ask, Madam Chair, that the members of this committee continue that practice.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. I appreciate it very much. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members. Process matters a great deal, and I appreciate the comment of Senator Rasmussen to reference the process of the Senate. When chairs are comfortable with the referral, that should be an indicator that the leading voice of that committee has considered the matter and given their consent, or in some cases, I imagine, withholding their consent. This Senate file has the consent. The chief author is asking to send it to Commerce. I want to acknowledge the comments of President Champion about the deference given to requests by chief authors. I do not suggest to you, members of the Rules Committee, that that's binding, but I think it's relevant. And Madam Chair, I want to thank you for pointing out the referral to Commerce in 2023. For all those reasons, I would ask the members of the Rules Committee, myself included, to send the bill to Commerce where it will get a hearing, honor the consumer protection portions of the bill, respect the indicated preference of the chief author and the chairs, and as has been stated many times, send it to all the committees necessary if it hopes to become law this year. Appreciate the consideration of the Rules Committee. Look forward to joining you again in person someday. I do want to add, Madam Chair, just for the record really, that this bill was referred to Rules on March 4th. It's been more than 2 weeks, and that's nobody's fault unless we want to blame the weather or change in schedule of religious holidays. But should this bill need additional consideration on timing from the Rules Committee, I just want to note for the record that this has been 2 weeks of delay. Again, nobody's fault, but hope the committee would take that into account in the future. With that, Madam Chair, look forward to the action of the Rules Committee on this bill.
Thank you, Senator Frentz. Senator Marty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Frentz and Senator Miller referred to Article 1 as talking about all these new consumer protections. It seems to me, again, don't have the other version in front of me, but the previous version had all this in another article later in the bill. Putting it in the front of the bill doesn't make it new. These discussion things, which I do not think are adequate, the language I've seen looks pretty much the same as what I've seen in the previous bill. And so I think we've got the fact we've got so many members of the state and local committee here. I think that's where, when I look at the committee jurisdiction, the handout here on this, there's not a single mention of gambling in the commerce jurisdiction, and I highlighted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, something like 9 references in here to Gambling Control Board, Racing Commission, State Lottery. The jurisdiction and the subtitle of the thing, it says the state and local committee jurisdiction is government over all bills, listing several, and then including gambling, lotteries, pari-mutuel wagering. In other words, anything related to gambling, that is the primary one. The fact that they reordered some of the sections, I don't think is a good justification for that. And if it's time for a motion, I'd like to move that it be referred to state and local. Re-referred, I believe, because it's here.
All right. Senator Marty moves that Senate File 4139 be re-referred to the Committee on State and Local Government. Senator Rusk requests a roll call. Members, do you have questions about the motion? Okay. Then seeing no questions, the clerk will take the roll. And by the way, we have 2 members of this committee who are in judiciary right now, just a couple of doors down. They know we're taking this vote, so we will move through this with some pace in case they can come, but they've known for a few minutes that we're going to take this vote, so they may not join us for this one. Any questions about the motion, Senator Marty's motion? The clerk will take the roll.
Senator Murphy?
No.
Senator Johnson?
Yes.
Senator Champion?
No.
Senator Coleman?
No.
Senator Frentz?
No.
Senator Limmer? Senator Marty?
Yes.
Senator Miller?
No.
Senator Pappas? Senator Rust?
No.
There being 6 noes and 2 yeses, the motion does not prevail. Senator Frentz, do you have a motion?
I do, Madam Chair. I move that the Rules Committee refer the file in question to the Commerce and Consumer Protection Committee, and I do ask for a roll call.
Senator Frentz moves that Senate File 4139 be re-referred to the Committee on Commerce and Consumer Protection and has requested a roll call. Members, do you have questions about the vote? Seeing no questions, the clerk will take the roll.
Senator Murphy?
Aye.
Senator Johnson?
No.
Senator Champion?
Aye.
Senator Coleman?
Aye.
Senator Frentz?
Yes.
Senator Limmer? Senator Marty?
No.
Senator Miller?
Aye.
Senator Pappas? Senator Rest.
Being 6 ayes and 2 noes, the motion is adopted and the bill is referred to the Committee on Commerce and Consumer Protection. Thank you, members, and thank you, Senator Frentz.
Thank you, members.
The next issue before us today is a Hauschild resolution, Senate File 3880. Senator Hauschild, thank you for joining us virtually. Welcome to the committee, and please proceed.
Thank you, Chair and members. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Excellent. I'm here today to present Senate File 3880, a resolution urging Congress and the President of the United States to reject federal legislation that would open the Boundary Waters Canoe Area to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security for infrastructure and immigration enforcement operations. The Boundary Waters is over 1 million acres of protected wilderness and one of the most visited wilderness areas in the country. It is a defining part of northern Minnesota and something Minnesotans of all political persuasions care deeply about. The concern with Senate File 2967 at the federal level is specific. It would authorize the Department of Homeland Security to construct roads, install surveillance infrastructure, and carry out expanded enforcement operations within a federally designated wilderness area. This resolution is about drawing a clear line around that proposal. Once you introduce permanent infrastructure and expanded operations into a wilderness area like the Boundary Waters, you change it in ways that cannot be undone. This resolution simply urges the federal government to respect existing wilderness protections and to keep the Boundary Waters as it was intended to be. And Madam Chair, I do have closing remarks. I believe we can open it maybe to discussion, but I've only been before rules once. So if I should just continue, I can, or I can wait to give closing remarks after.
Thank you, Senator Hauschild. And if you were here in person, we would have expected some sort of something to signify your very first visit to rules. But since you're back at home, we'll forego that. Members, do you have questions for Senator Hauschild on the resolution he's bringing before us? We will need a motion once Senator Hauschild has made his closing remarks. Thank you, Senator Rest. Senator Hauschild, I'm seeing no comments from the committee, so if you'd like to proceed with your closing remarks, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Again, the question before us is whether the U.S. Department of Homeland Security should be supported in their authorization to carry out infrastructure and enforcement operations inside one of the most protected wilderness areas in the country. Allowing federal infrastructure and enforcement operations inside the wilderness would set a precedent and create lasting impacts far beyond this moment. This resolution sends a respectful but firm message that Minnesota believes this unprecedented legislation to allow surveillance and infrastructure inside the Boundary Waters goes against everything this wilderness area stands for, most of which, in my opinion, is a true American value of freedom. Freedom from surveillance, freedom of the great outdoors, and freedom of solitude. I think we can all agree on that, and that this federal legislation is severely misguided. I greatly appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hauschild. Senator Rest, a motion?
Madam Chair, I need the words.
Sure.
Madam Chair, I move that Senate File 3880 be recommended to pass. It will be sent to general orders.
Thank you, Senator Rest. Any questions about that motion? Seeing no questions, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say no.
No.
The ayes have it, and the resolution is recommended to pass and on its way to the general orders.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hauschild, and I hope you have a really lovely weekend up north. The last matter before us today is the committee resolution on Rule 15. Members, that is in your packet as well. And this is work on the part of a number of our members to change one of our rules about who is admitted to the chamber, and I would turn to Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Please tell me if I get this wrong. I move to lay Senate Resolution 127-3 on the table.
Oh, we're not going to lay it on the table. We're going to take it up.
Oh.
Yeah. So
Then-
would you like to speak in favor of, so let's move.
Then I move that.
Yeah, let's move the committee resolution, Senate Resolution 127-3 for consideration by the committee.
Madam Chair, would this be a good time to offer my comments for it?
Yes, Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I learned today that it has been 99 years since the first woman was elected to serve in the state Senate. In that time, we have not made any changes to create a culture where women who want to carry and care for children can be both mothers and public servants. The only change we have really made for women is not requiring them to wear ties, progress that I seem to resist often. But there is other progress I would like to see be made. And I apologize, I am going to get a bit vulnerable here, but 6 years, 3 infants, a lot of struggle, and a lot of pretty unfair things that have been said to my face are all bubbling up. I can tolerate a lot. When I had a 1-year-old and premature twin infants, I tolerated a lot of struggle, unnecessary struggle here for working mothers of babies, because at the time, I was the only one. At the time, I was the youngest woman ever elected to the Senate, and I felt an overwhelming sense that I had to prove I could do it in a system designed before mothers could serve. Now, this isn't a reflection of our sergeants. They do a great job enforcing the rules we place upon ourselves. But when I saw Senator Verbaeten being walked off the floor with a sick baby who just wanted his mommy, I could not tolerate it for somebody else. And my heart broke for Senator Verbaeten because I have walked through those struggles. I understand deeply that public service means sacrifice and a lot of time away from one's kids. I understand I need to have reliable and consistent childcare. But like every other working parent, I've experienced the last-minute hiccups. The child care center's closed, babysitter's car broke down, or most recently a snow day came up. But unlike other parents, there is not a fill-in for me, and there is no set schedule. I have to push my button and vote. I have to present my bill. I have to speak for my district on the floor. I have to meet with constituents who came here to see me. I can't call somebody else in to do that. I deeply understand supporting and respecting the institution, but the institution was designed before people like Senators Verbaeten and May Quaid and myself came along. I've been told it is my duty to be here in person, not to vote remotely. And when I say, okay, I have a child care emergency, I need to bring my children, I'm told no. We as mothers here have been set up to fail. At its best, the Senate is a hostile working environment for mothers. At its worst, it is intentionally designed to keep people like us out. And I'll give you a few examples. A few years ago, on a rare occasion when I had a child care hiccup, I had to bring my 3-year-old with me. There's a photo I shared with you, Madam Chair, of my 3-year-old with his hand on the Senate door outside. I had to get on his level and say, baby, Mama has to go in and vote. Can I come with you, he asked me. No, honey. You have to stay here and please do not move. I am lucky that it was the Senate photographer that came across my child and not a stranger. Yes, I was here. I could vote, but could I participate in the debate? No. Remote voting cannot be the only answer. We can't guarantee it will always be an option. And saying that should be the parent's first choice when there's a childcare snafu means they should not be able to speak up that day. I'll give you another example. When I was on bed rest with my twins, when they were born premature and needed care that wouldn't allow them to receive traditional childcare, I've been told I shouldn't have voted remotely. I shouldn't be able to bring them, and I should have resigned. This system is designed for women who want to carry children to fail. Now, this change would be a huge step forward, but as an example of the work that we still have to do for mothers here, when we have these long floor debates, everyone's needs are met. They can eat and drink in the retiring room and run to the bathroom. But I did not have space off the floor to pump. And holding the voting board open for 15 minutes every couple of hours or twice a day so I could do that was not an option. And when you can't pump regularly, it goes away. I lost my ability to breastfeed my premature infants because of how this institution is designed. This institution gave me less rights than I had at my first job with my first baby. To this day, I am upset by the fact that this institution prevented me from feeding my babies. So I urge members, please vote in favor of this monumental change that we have worked very hard to make sure it is crafted for very specific instances. The makeup of the Senate has changed a lot since it was designed, and we need to make sure everyone can participate. I am done having children. Once they started doubling on me, I bowed out of that. But I am attempting to plant seeds for trees that other young parents coming after me can sit under and be protected by. And I want to thank Senator Umuver-Baton and May Quaid and others for their work on this. And Senator Umuver-Baton, thank you for your courage to speak up for yourself. And I am sorry that I didn't have the courage to speak up for myself when it was my turn. And I hope this makes up for it. I encourage members to vote aye on this motion.
Thank you, Senator Coleman.
Senator Murphy,
Senator Rest.
would you clarify the motion?
The motion before us right now is taking up committee resolution, the Senate Resolution 127-3.
And so is the motion to pass it? I'm
No.
trying to
No,
understand.
we have the committee resolution before us. We haven't made a motion to pass it. And if there's an amendment,
Okay.
now would be the time to consider amendments.
So, Madam Chair, I have an amendment.
Thank you, Senator Rest.
Thank you. Madam
The
Chair,
amendment's being distributed by the
it's the
pages.
A6.
We have the A6 amendment. Thank you very much. We'll just get this distributed for people before we discuss it. Welcome to the committee, Senator Pappas.
Madam Chair, I do apologize. I was just next door in judiciary.
Yep.
Assuming somebody would have called me sooner if I was needed.
Oh, we're so glad you're here.
Thanks.
Does everybody have the amendment? Senators have the amendment? Senator Rest?
Thank you.
To the A6 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The A6 amendment does three things to the Rule 15. First of all, on line 1.2, the occasion for considering a change in Rule 15 has really come before us in the last few weeks. And I know that a number of people have been working on it, as well as myself. But the first thing is to make the rule reviewable as we begin the 2027, or as you begin the 2027 session. We know that with other rules that certainly not as important a subject that this one deals with, that we've often gotten, we made it more controversial than it needs to be, and changes were made on the floor. And it seems to me that if we take it up until, adopt it, take it up until the beginning of the next session, that will give us a chance to make sure that everyone involved is treated fairly and compassionately, and that the rule as written that is before us, if my amendment is adopted, will be validated. And what could simply happen on January 11th is a motion to remove move the temporary date and make it a permanent addition to the temporary rules is what it would amount to. The second part is to make sure that it is the member who brings a child onto the floor has the sole responsibility for that child while the child is on the floor. If the member needs to leave the floor for any reason that this rule does not apply in a hallway, for example. If someone is helping the member in the hallway when the member has to be gone for a short time, this doesn't apply to that sole responsibility. And then we had in the original resolution, that a child that is admitted to the floor pursuant to the rule may consume formula or milk in the Senate chamber. And I thought that was very limited. We have a rule in the Senate that says no eating on the floor. And it was much simpler to say, we're not going to tell a 1-year-old that they can't have an animal cracker or that they can't have juice instead of milk. That gets too fine-tuned for me, and I'm perfectly happy to allow the mother or the father to determine what is appropriate for their child to consume on the floor. So I just made Rule 17.6 is a simpler way of just saying it doesn't apply to a child coming on the Senate floor. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and then that would allow line 122 to be deleted.
Thank you, Senator Rest. Again, members, we're looking at the A6 amendment moved by Senator Rest to Senator Marty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate has a lot of things on decorum and so on, but on this, I think it shouldn't take Senator Coleman and Senator Umu verbatim to have really horrific experiences to say we ought to change it. And what we have right now is, as the chair pointed out, we'd be making a permanent change in the temporary rules. I don't think we should just say, well, we'll let the next legislature redecide. I think we should decide now. And so I don't like that idea of the 2027. I think we should just make the change if they want to. These are still, as we know, temporary rules, and the next legislature has the ability to do that. The other part of the amendment, I guess I have questions for some of the mothers around, and when I keep thinking when I had young kids, they weren't allowed on the floor. But I just keep thinking if the member has, say, a 6-month-old in a infant seat or something, and the mother has to go to the restroom, or the father or whoever has to go to the restroom, and their seatmate is taking care of the kid. I just think the idea you're going to have to haul them out to go to the restroom and everything, I think I trust the mothers and fathers and the sergeants and everyone to be reasonable if we just say, hey, the parents are responsible for supervision of their children, because I think the young mothers we have in the room, I guess I think they are going to be responsible. And the fact that if we put too many words in, somebody's going to say, oh, you went to go to the restroom, or see somebody outside for a second, and therefore your kid has to come with you. I'm worried about that. I'm not saying that's terrible. I'm just saying I'm a little concerned, and I think we should just say that the parent is responsible for the supervision of the child.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Marty. Senator Rest?
Thank you. Well, Senator Marty, I appreciate your comments, but I do believe that that I, as a mother of a baby that many years ago, she had to go everywhere with me, period. And that it was a real blessing when on occasion a friend or my husband was able to help me in childcare. But the job I was doing was also important to me as a person, as part of my identity, and I also wanted to devote myself full-time to it as well. So I had 2 full-time jobs. And I think that the wording of this amendment is an improvement, particularly with regard to the food, consumption of food. I don't want to keep adding to the list of that's in the original resolution. When are we going to add juice? When are we going to add cookies? Because we're talking about children coming on the floor, not just for the first 6 months of their lives, but a child, a minor child, and that means actually, for whatever reason, that it might be appropriate that that child can be up to 18 years of age. And I don't think that, this is not about decorum. That's what Rule 17.6 is. This, what we're changing, are proposing to change, is who can come on the Senate floor. Not anywhere else in the building, but on the Senate floor. I'm grateful that the resolution does not include coming into the Senate retiring room. The child can be in the hallways, it can be in anybody's office, or outside the chamber in some way. But I do really think it's important that the parent, whether it's the father or the mother, has the child under constant supervision. It's respectful of the body. It's respectful of the mother. And I would assume that when a mother or a father needs to leave the floor for any reason, that they will have probably as much as they can have planned for it on most occasions, and will have somebody in the hallway or in a nearby office ready to take care of their child. I would hope it is not, would not be considered a part of their job if they're an employee, and that we would not think askance of someone who says, no, I choose not to take responsibility for your child, or anybody who says, I'd love to do it, but it shouldn't be on the floor of the Senate.
Thank you, Senator Rest. There are a couple of members who have questions, but I also want to make sure that I acknowledge that Senator Uma Verbaeten, Senator McQuaid, and Senator Amanda Hemmingson-Yager are here, and would invite you, if you have comments after the members' questions are done, to come to the witness stand. Senator Frentz, you had your hand up. Do you have a question?
No, Madam Chair, but I want to thank the members of the committee and count my vote in for whatever is necessary to promote and protect motherhood. We run around talking about how Minnesota is a great state to raise a family. We better ask ourselves if this workplace and its current approach is appropriate. In my opinion, we need to move in this direction and move immediately. Having never given birth, Madam Chair, but having been very close by 4 times when it happened, I think we need to ask, is it time for this change? And I think we definitely should make this change. I will defer to those that have actually gone through it and faced the greatest challenge to their ability to serve the state and the Senate district that they represent. So if there needs to be further discussion on the amendment, count me in for whatever consensus there could be. This is important, members. We want it to be a great place to work. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Frentz. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Coleman, I'm really sorry about what you went through. It was really a difficult time, I know, for you. And I was really fortunate that when I came in, my youngest was 2.5. And I had a really strong partner. Basically, my husband was primary parent during session, so he had to deal with any of the childcare issues, take time off work or whatever, so that I could be here often until midnight or 2 in the morning, when I would go home and probably still did a little nursing with that 2.5-year-old, because I'd been gone away from her all day. We also went through when Senator Mimua was here. She was on bed rest and in the hospital during session. And I remember Ellen Anderson had Andy's parents that were here to back up for her. I mean, if you don't have, relatives handy, and if your vote isn't needed, as I guess we lived without Mimua's vote during that period, then we can manage here. But if everyone needs to be here, it's very, very difficult. I was very happy that, 10 years ago, we passed the Women's Economic Security Act, which did provide more pregnancy protections and more nursing protections for mothers, so that we do have nursing rooms, and pregnant women are now able to take rests and take breaks if they need to while they're working. In terms of this specific amendment, I actually like the language that Senator Rest brought us about children admitted to the floor are just exempt, rather than doubling down on what kind of juice or what kind of animal crackers they eat. I like that part. I don't think we do need the January 11th, 2027. I think the committee, next year, the Rules Committee can decide if they want to extend it, change it, whatever. And I do feel like I would like broader language, as Senator Marty suggested, which is parents are responsible for their children, but not to be so specific that they have to accompany them at every single minute or second. The example of being able to run to the bathroom while your seatmate agrees to watch the sleeping baby, I think is perfectly fine.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is it possible to divide the amendment?
Oh, we are capable of dividing amendments, yes.
I've been on rules long enough. I should know what I can and can't do.
I'm wondering, Senator Coleman, if you would just pause for a moment on that, because our counsel is at the other end of the table, and I would want her here with us. And perhaps what we could do is invite, if our colleagues in the Senate who have been involved in this would want to come and share their perspective, and then we can come back to the drafting. Welcome, each of you, to the committee. Thank you for the work you've been doing on this. If you'd introduce yourselves and please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can begin. Senator Claire Umover-Baton. I just want to start by thanking Senator Coleman for being brave and vulnerable enough to share her story with everyone today. I think that was really powerful and brought me to tears. And I don't want you to feel like you let anyone down. You've been such an amazing partner, and it takes more moms getting here, right, to make this change, and we're going to do it. I think we're really close. As far as the amendment, I'll just share my brief comments, and then I'd love to pass to my colleagues as well. I think the last line, 1.4, the language "children admitted to the floor are exempt from Rule 17.6" is a good approach. Have no concerns with that. I would be opposed to the language sort of having this rule expire January 11, 2027. It sounds like Senator Marty has an idea, and maybe was working with counsel on different language that gets at what Senator Rest was hoping to accomplish with the idea that members are responsible for their children. So I'd like to see what that is, and then I know that Senator Coleman had asked for division, but there's at least a piece here of the language that I think we'd be happy to move forward with, and then might need to see what else is proposed by the committee on the earlier part of the amendment. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Umover-Baton. Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. I also want to thank Senator Coleman for sharing her story and for her friendship and partnership and being a new mom in this place. So much of your story resonated with me. My daughter was 6 months when I started here. I was still breastfeeding, and I had to stop because I wasn't with her, and I wasn't allowed to drink water on the floor. And she got sick during that first session, and she ended up in the ER, and they were worried that they were going to have to intubate her, so we couldn't give her any formula. But she said I could breastfeed her because breast milk is a clear liquid. And I just lost it because I couldn't breastfeed her because I'd had this job. This place is hostile to moms, particularly new moms, and I don't want to have this fight again in 2027. I don't want the next generation of moms who come into the Senate to have to fight again and to tell their stories again. This should just come to be a place where moms are welcome and where they are celebrated and able to do their jobs. I do like the language on 1.4 about exempting children from 17.6. But I want us to just remember that we're all senators. We did a lot of work to get here. We are very responsible people, and that responsibility extends even when we have our children. We know their limits, we know their cues, and I wouldn't want to require a sleeping baby who could be easily handed to me while Senator Verbaeten goes to the bathroom to have to be taken into a bathroom instead of left with a loving colleague. In fact, I would say we have the most agency of anybody in this body because we are the senators to decline or say no. And so I think we can trust ourselves to be responsible and make this change. And I carry a lot of that same shame, Senator Coleman, because I didn't advocate for myself. And I feel like if I had, Senator Verbaeten wouldn't be sitting here today. But we can make us the last people who have to sit here and do this. And I would love us to take that opportunity.
Thank you, Senator McQuaid.
Good afternoon. I'm Senator Amanda Hemmingson-Yeager. First, I just want to say thank you for allowing us to speak. Let me share kind of my story. We are in a really unique, I think, workplace. I was just looking at numbers because that's my thing. Women are still outnumbered in the Senate, 45 to 22. So I think, women have come a long way, and there's been a lot of firsts, coming into the Senate, and that's a lot for women to carry. And I think it's a lot, again, too, to kind of keep that door open for other women behind us. Senator Coleman, thank you so much. I'm sorry you had to go through all of that, and anytime I can give you a hug or a piece of chocolate, I'm here. To my other colleagues too, I am so sorry you had to go through this. And, as a union employee, as a state employee, we're still fighting to even get the space for breastfeeding and pumping, and even to get the time to do that and not take that away from our vacation or our break time and all those intricacies, but I digress. I do appreciate the creativity for line 1.4 saying that children admitted are exempt. I think that's cleaner, and I do appreciate kind of that look at that. I do have a unique perspective in that I came from the House. So for 3 years in the House, we had just a rule. I think it just simply states that you can bring a family member or a child to the floor. Logistics, it was a little bit easier because we did have the alcove space. I could bring, I think something, my 8-year-old had an ear infection. My husband was stuck in urgent care. Victoria had to get homework done, and we weren't able to have both of them together. So I think Chuck brought my 10-year-old to the house, and she sat in the alcove, very quiet, did her homework. I've seen babies on the floor from both sides of the aisle. And apart from just the ability to care for your child, mom or dad, they do bring a positive energy in. People smile a little bit more. Maybe there's people a little bit more open to listening, but, I've seen 4-year-olds, again, coloring books, having little headphones on. I've seen grandparents, I'm sure, caring for kids. We talk about the support structure, and we are lucky when we have grandparents and aunts and uncles and siblings that can come and help, kind of pinch hit for childcare. But we can also be in a workplace where we have colleagues that are willing to step in and pinch hit for, an urgent meeting or an urgent phone call or going to the bathroom or getting a drink of water. So I just think this can be a really cool next step. I've seen it work very successfully in the House. I've seen it work successfully in other workplaces. And I just think that we could make it work successfully in the Senate. I know Senator McQuaid said it very nicely, where it's we all understand the responsibility and the trust that our community has placed in us, we are going to be responsible in making sure that our children and the people with us are also, being responsible and taking that very seriously too. So thank you for allowing me to make some comments.
Thank you for joining us and for your perspectives on this. Senator Marty?
Madam Chair, I think Senate Council has a suggested amendment to the amendment that I'd like to offer.
Ms. Stengel?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Marty. I'll describe what we talked about, and you can tell me if I've gotten it correct. Looking at the A6 amendment, there are two pieces to this. The first would be on page 1, line 2, to delete until January 11th, 2027. And the second piece would be on line 1.3, delete everything after the comma, and on line 1.4, delete everything before the word children, and insert the following phrase: the member must be responsible for the supervision of the member's children. So putting all of that together, that sentence would then read, at all times while on the Senate floor, the member must be responsible for the supervision of the member's children. And then the existing sentence, children admitted to the floor are exempt from Rule 17.6.
Senator Marty?
Madam Chair, I think that would be an improvement. It takes some of the good things that Senator Rest was offering, and I think it strengthens the bill overall, because I think it is appropriate to at least state the parent is responsible for the child, but I think parents are responsible and will be here in the Senate. I trust my colleagues that way. And I think the rules for decorum are strong enough, and this change is long overdue, but I think this is a good step forward.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Marty. Senator Rest?
Thank you. I certainly can be in favor of a weaker responsibility, as I recall it, as I regard it, for asserting responsibility, but I can't accept that this is not something that should be reviewed in the next session. So I'm going to oppose it and at this point and ask for a roll call.
Thank you, Senator Rest. And a roll call has been requested. Senator Coleman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Marty, for the amendment to the amendment. I think this is good compromise language, and it sounds like everyone who's been working on it is on board. So I encourage a aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Coleman. I'm going to ask Ms. Stengel to review the amendment to the amendment one more time, in part because we have members who are virtual. And I just want to make sure that before we take up the vote, that everybody has heard clearly what is being before us before we take a vote. So, Ms. Stengel.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. On the A6 amendment, page 1, line 2, delete until January 11, 2027. On page 1, line 3, delete everything after the comma. Page 1, line 4, delete everything before the word children, and insert, the member must be responsible for the supervision of the member's children, period. And Madam Chair, if you would be so kind, if as part of that motion, you would allow staff to make technical corrections, just in case I've missed any little pieces, that would be helpful.
Yes, Ms. Stengel, when we will ask the staff to make corrections if necessary, follow the adoption of the amendment. You're welcome. Members, do you have any questions before we proceed? A roll call has been requested on the amendment to this amendment. So Senator Marty moves an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will take the roll.
Senator Murphy?
Yes.
Senator Johnson?
No.
Senator Champion?
Yes.
Senator Coleman?
Yes.
Senator Frentz?
Yes.
Senator Limmer? Senator Marty?
Yes.
Senator Miller?
No.
Senator Pappas?
Yes.
Senator Rest?
No.
Being 6 ayes and 3 noes, the amendment to the amendment is adopted. And members, before us now is the A6 amendment as amended. Does anybody have questions to the A6 amendment?
Roll call.
Senator Rest has requested a roll call. Seeing no questions, members, turn on your cameras. The clerk will take the roll.
Senator Murphy?
One moment. Oh, before we start, is this on the underlying passage of the underlying bill or simply on the amending the bill itself?
Thank you, Senator Johnson. We are going to take a vote on the amended A6 amendment.
And Madam Chair, if I could please, just before we do that, so what is that, where does that put us? Is that on the final passage of the amendment?
We just voted on that. on
We
the morning
have
amendment.
voted on the amendment to the amendment, which we
Oh, I
have
see, I
added
see,
to the
I see.
A6 amendment.
Now it has.
And now we're going to vote on the
On the
A6
amendment,
amendment
right.
as amended.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. I know it's harder when you're virtual. It's hard enough when you're in person. Okay. All right. Are there further questions?
And still a roll call.
Senator Rest has requested a roll call on the A6 amendment as amended. The clerk will take the roll.
Senator Murphy?
Aye.
Senator Johnson?
Aye.
Senator Champion? Aye. Senator Coleman?
Aye.
Senator Frentz?
Yes.
Senator Limmer? Senator Marty?
Aye.
Senator Miller?
Aye.
Senator Pappas?
Aye.
Senator Rest?
No.
There are 8 ayes and 1 no, and the amendment is adopted. Members, before us is the amended resolution. So many cues coming at us. Before we take a final vote, I would like to invite Secretary Bodden, who wanted to speak briefly to the administration of the changed rule.
Madam Chair,
Welcome to the committee.
thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. At the outset, I want to say these are your rules and this is your Senate chamber. So I have some considerations for you, but I want to be very clear. My staff and I will do our best to make these rules work properly. And much of what I'm about to say is not really to suggest particular changes, but considerations I would like members to keep in mind if this becomes part of the Senate rules, if this change becomes part of the rules. The chamber is a relatively constricted space. Corridors and pathways through the chamber are frequently blocked. Often, this can conflict with the Senate's culture of amendments on demand, and they need to be delivered promptly, frequently. Some of these changes may slow the ability of staff to get amendments to members immediately and may affect that. I just want members to keep that in mind. I think the proposed rule speaks to this in part, but we don't at the moment have any limits on numbers of children who might be present, again, in a relatively constricted chamber. Obviously, there's, I think the way it's written, there is the judgment of the caucus leaders involved. The rule is written to permit minor children, so we've been discussing appropriately and properly infants and young children. This is all the way up through age 17. It's possible there may be a day where things become a little more crowded and this becomes a consideration. I just want to note that and believe that I can work with the leaders to ensure this doesn't result in a situation where, again, the ability of staff and members to do their work is impeded. One other thing I want to point out with respect to that is our capacity for additional seating is very limited.
I really want to underline that. That isn't something that happens rapidly. We're strained to the limits if you look at folding chairs next to bus in the back of the chamber, by way of illustration. So again, we will do our best to make this work, but please keep this in consideration, particularly again, if we're talking about children through the age of 17. And much of what I'm saying here is, I have no idea what this will look like. By training, I look at a rule and or a statute and think about the possibilities and try to anticipate the unexpected. So just keep that in mind. The other aspect of a relatively crowded chamber that I want you to consider is from time to time, it is not uncommon during some of our busier days for staff who are present, who are not working on the bill that is immediately before the body, to be told to leave the chamber. So consider how these two features will work together. Again, it's a consideration. I'm not suggesting to you there has to be a particular outcome here, but keep that in mind. The last few points really have to do with the more direct administration of this rule and who is responsible for some of these provisions. There are different standards. Reasonable people can differ on, what is appropriate behavior from a child. Are they being too loud? Are they being disruptive? I think the request I would make very respectfully here is if one member perceives that another member's children are not behaving appropriately, I'll say it like this: be very, very careful about involving staff in delivering that message. I think that's important. Again, with respect to minor children under the age of 18 and teenagers, we have some very young Senate staff as well, pages, interns, and so forth. The possibility exists for confusion with whether someone is properly admitted to the floor. I'm not saying it needs to be written into the rule, but please consider some flexibility in the approach to how older children are identified. Again, for the purposes of security, we're putting a lot of attention on that recently. I think it's important to keep that in mind. The last piece, and really the thing that sits with me, and I realize this may be very difficult, but please keep in mind, I'll be more direct about it. Please do not ask staff to provide childcare. That's, I think, the way it has to be. I understand that some staff may volunteer, but just simply asking them can put them in a very awkward position. So I wanted to say these things on behalf of staff who've been thinking about how this rule may work. And appreciate your time and your consideration. Certainly willing to take any questions.
Thank you, Secretary Bodnar. Other questions for the Secretary? Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Secretary. And that's an interesting point that you bring up too. I mean, anybody up to age 17. I've got a 14-year-old son who's very interested in state government and in politics, and this rule would then allow him to come with and participate, or I shouldn't say participate, but be on the floor with me. To the right of me, I have Senator Jasinski. In front of me, there's very little space between me and Senator Dames. Behind me, there's very limited space. So looking at the floor itself, a folding chair would have to be provided right next to me, which would be blocking the exit and entrance for folks coming in and off of the floor because I'm sitting next to the door. So anything from, an emergency to just general ingress and egress might be blocked. What would the situation be for something like that? I mean, would my son have to be sitting up front then with staff in that situation? Or would we just have to take the inconvenience then of having somebody sitting to my left impeding traffic flow?
Secretary Bodnar.
Madam Chair, Senator Johnson gave you a more thorough explanation of the concerns I have about how constricted the space in the chamber is and some of the difficulties we may face. I am not enthusiastic about placing members' children at the page bench.
That's frequently used. There's a lot of movement there. It gets pretty crowded. They're from time to time handling confidential documents and so forth. So I will say I'm at somewhat of a loss for solving the puzzle of where to seat somebody. Maybe there is some room for standing around the edges of the chamber, but we've all seen it. The chamber can become very crowded. Clearly, there's a large unwritten portion of this rule that will depend on the good sense and reason of members in, how this is implemented, and might require perhaps further changes. But again, hoping that with this understanding, we can work together to accommodate it. Again, I'll repeat it, I'm not enthused about the idea of adding any additional folding chairs on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Bodden, and I appreciate the foresight that you bring and the considerations that you raise. I remember when I was first sworn in the other body, and I had twin daughters who were very, very young teenagers, and they sat with me through that long floor session, and they made a lot of notes about what the heck was going on, and I kept that, if anybody would ever want to look at it, because it's pretty funny, their observations about what the heck was going on. But it also reminded me that for me to do my job, I would be better served if my kids weren't with me, except for if they needed to be with me. And I imagine that our colleagues are going to address the work that they do here with that same discretion, and that people, mothers or fathers, may be in a pinch, as Senator Coleman described, and when it is necessary. But we all live in this space of the chamber. We all know that it is crowded. We know what it is like when there are additional people there, members from the other body or our staff. And I do believe that we, with respect for one another, will be able to manage through that. We also have special instructions in the rule with the approval of the respective caucus leader, and that puts additional expectation on whoever is the leader of each caucus to participate in the management of this, if you will. And I understand and appreciate that. When we make this the rule of the Senate, that will be my job. I will say I already have a lot of responsibility for managing behavior, good and bad, that comes with the work of being a member of this really, really remarkable institution of the Minnesota Senate. So I appreciate it, and your experience matters to me and to members, but you have my word as the current caucus leader for the Senate Democrats and as the majority leader that I will work with our members to make sure that we're able to conduct the business that the people sent us to do, knowing that there will be times when a parent will choose to bring their child. And I hope that when we adopt this rule, that baby Leo is able to join us.
Thank you.
Senator Marty?
Madam Chair, just one quick observation, and that is that what Senator Johnson's example, I think, is an appropriate one, and that's where when we have kids who are that age and very interested in this, we want to encourage it, but that's what the gallery is for, and I think both you and Senator Johnson understand that, and I think that doesn't negate the need to address this thing that makes some members of the public and some members of the Senate unable to participate because of family matters. So I appreciate this and glad to support it.
Other questions, members? Senator Johnson. Senator Johnson, you're on mute.
Of course. Thank you. Sorry about that. So that's a good point that Senator Marty brings up. And I think that kind of calls attention to probably the language of the amendment itself, or the resolution itself, and allowing all the way up to a minor child. If the intent is simply that it's nursing mothers, it's things like that the gallery is available for older children, maybe that's the appropriate place. I just had two additional points I wanted to make, and that is to Secretary Bodden. Secretary Bodden, in the formulation of this resolution, were you or your staff involved in the considerations of this language?
Secretary Bodden.
Madam Chair, and with apologies to Senator Johnson, I would consider the conversations themselves confidential, but I'll say so far we have not provided input.
And Madam Chair, I think there are.
Senator Johnson.
That's an upgrade there. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think, from my perspective, there are a lot of avenues in this. And we've had conversations in the past, Madam Chair, where I think there are situations where I think this is appropriate, and making sure that it's amenable to both children and mothers and working mothers is a good idea. But I think there are a lot of considerations that weren't put in to this particular resolution itself. And I am concerned at how this could be used on the floor and the execution of that on the floor as well too. I believe that it needs further work on it before we bring this back up into Rules Committee. And it's not that I think that it should go away or anything like that, but simply we need some more work on it. So, Madam Chair, I would like to entertain a motion to lay this on the table and bring it up at a further point until we can get these concerns worked on, Madam Chair. And I would like a roll call on that.
Senator Johnson makes a motion to lay this resolution on the table, and he's asked for a roll call vote. Members, do you have questions? Seeing no questions, the clerk will take the roll.
Senator Murphy?
Nope.
Senator Johnson?
Yes.
Senator Champion?
No.
Senator Coleman?
No.
Senator Frentz?
No.
Senator Limmer? Senator Marty?
No.
Senator Miller? Senator Pappas?
No.
Senator Rust?
Yes, yes, I'm sorry.
There's six noes and 3 ayes. There are 3 ayes and 6 noes, and the motion is not adopted. Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that Committee Resolution SR 127-3 as amended be approved, and that staff be directed to prepare the same as a resolution for consideration on the floor.
Thank you, Senator Coleman. Members, do you have questions?
Roll call, please.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing no questions, the clerk will take the roll.
Senator Murphy?
Aye.
Senator Johnson?
No.
Senator Champion?
Yes.
Senator Coleman?
Absolutely, yes.
Senator Frentz?
Yes.
Senator Limmer? Senator Marty?
Yes.
Senator Miller?
No.
Senator Pappas?
Yes.
Senator Rust?
Since we're using adverbs, definitely no.
That there are 6 ayes and 3 noes. The resolution, SR 127-3, as amended, is definitely adopted. Thank you, members. There being no further business before the Rules Committee, the Rules Committee is adjourned, and in 1 minute, we're going to take up the subcommittee on subcommittees. For those of you who really want to stay for that, it is very exciting. This meeting is adjourned. I'm going to call the subcommittee and committees to order. Today is Thursday, March 19th, 2026. It is now 4:34 p.m. Before us today is one item of business, and that is to approve appointments to the Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans. That is reflected on the Subcommittee on Committees appointment list dated March 19th, 2026. We will be adding to the Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans Senator Amanda Hemmingsen-Yager and Senator Curran. I'm happy to entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I apologize. Senator Rest and I were going down memory lane in the House. Would you please repeat that?
Absolutely. Senator Pappas. Before us is...
I also apologize.
It's definitely acceptable. We are entertaining a motion, if someone makes it, to appoint Senator Amanda Hemmingsen-Yager and Senator Mark Curran to the Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Senator Champion moves the appointment of Senator Amanda Hemmingsen-Yager and Senator Mark Curran to the Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans. Members, do you have questions? Seeing no questions, please turn on your camera if you're still with us. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And those opposed say no. The motion is adopted, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, members.